changing NDE. Probably the day I shattered my neck. I was floating in a Saluda, North Carolina lake. I was relaxing on a warm day, feeling the water on my skin. I looked up and saw the white puffy clouds and lakeside trees, feeling grateful. I felt grateful since I was meditating again, something I started 7 years before my NDE. In my youth, I was a U.S. Army Ranger in Special Forces. After the military, I meditated. I discovered war by training for it. I meditated after 3 trips to Iraq and discovered serenity. I trained for conflict and found it. I trained for serenity and found tranquility again in this lake. A few seconds of serious meditation in the water led me to swim to a dock. I was at this lake for a friend party. I swam to a wooden dock with a blue water slide people were using. I climbed this slide stairs in line. An old blue plastic water slide from a summer camp movie. It was weak. The person ahead of me dove headfirst, so I waited. I went down the slide headfirst without thinking. It was slick with water falling and a little spray on top. After speeding down the slide, I jumped headfirst into the water, sweeping my arms back. I hardly had time to remove my hands from my face before hitting the lake bottom. I didn't realize that region was only 2 feet deep. Previous people must have known, but I didn't. Hit the sand and pebbles and shattered my neck. I immediately heard a voice say, "Slow down," and I started meditating again, since I was in the worst pain of my life. I initially assumed I was struck by lightning. I didn't comprehend the pain's source. I didn't realize I'd hit the lake bottom until my neck hurt my whole body. I couldn't breathe. I stood up from the knee-deep water and staggered ahead. I saw basketball-sized light orbs floating in the air while performing this, because I was knocked unconscious. I didn't notice them much, but now I realize they were things or beings. I was really close to death, and I feel like these spirits, angels, and guardians come close to prepare us for death. When I stumble out of the water and reach a bench, friends understand something is amiss. I'm in pain but don't realize my neck is broken. They helped me lay on the bench, and my medical military training told me I was in shock. I had to lie down, elevate my feet, and when I was on this bench, the voice within me said, "You have to go now." So I informed everyone within earshot, "I have to go now," and tried to use my arm to push myself up off the bench and sit up. I slid off the bench face first into the gravel instead of pushing myself up, which left me partially paralyzed. There was a hubbub surrounding me. I felt hands beneath my armpits lifting me to a car. They took me to the hospital in the automobile. After a 40-minute journey, the hospital told me I had a severely damaged neck after scans. After crushing my vertebrae, if the automobile stopped quickly, I would have perished without a head. I was informed I required a team for emergency surgery. I had to stay in the hospital overnight for a complex surgery. The surgery was the next day. It sounds terrible, but I was practicing meditation the way teachers and monks in monasteries taught me, to observe the sensations in my body and try not to resist or crave it to go away. It changed as I did it. I was able to endure the fire burning my body. I liken it to wave riding. Surfers are euphoric on this energy, but if they fall, they tumble and hurt. I felt terrible agony in my neck and throughout my body, yet it wasn't pain. The change was astounding. Morphine was provided, but I declined. I want to be with this anguish, especially if I die. I must pay close attention to my last breath. I was simply breathing, focusing on the pain, and lying in this hospital room. Pain overpowered me after 2 hours. I crashed off the surfboard and was writhing in pain. I couldn't handle the intensity. I answered, "Yes, okay, I'll take morphine." Then something unusual happened. The nurse seemed to dim the lights progressively while I was on the stretcher. I felt like I was being sucked into a tunnel, moving backwards, and I realized, I'm actually dying. My heart stopped because I was too frail to manage the rapid morphine rush. I could hear my heart flatlining on the monitor behind me, and then I got afraid because I saw nurses coming into the room from the end of a tunnel that kept growing longer. However, when they rushed into the room, their dread and mine flowed over me and revived my energies. I felt myself coming back down the tunnel and into my body, and it was the first time I actually left and had the near-death, out-of-body experience. Another would follow the next day. In preparation for surgery the next day, I laid on the stretcher with a neck brace. In 2020, during COVID-19, my mask kept slipping over my eyes due to the neck brace, making me feel constricted. I felt like I was in a box and could only meditate. Perhaps the smallest meditation cell or room I've ever entered. I asked the nurses where my body would go after they removed the mask. They said, "Oh, well, we're going to take you to surgery." I said, "No, for some reason, it's very important that I know exactly where my body goes." They said, "Okay, we'll take you down the hallway, to this elevator, up to this floor, and to this room, and then we'll begin surgery, and then we'll bring you back down, and you'll wake up in this room." After they gave me the sedative, I remember being out of my body and standing at a doorway. The portal floated in space and the void. Despite the darkness, there were stars in the distance and 6 light beings in front of me. My sense was that the entryway was 15 feet tall, and they were 11 feet tall. However, I was out of my body, these beings were smart, and we had ended a long talk. About 6 hours were spent on surgery. It was made impossible for me to remember what they showed me and what we talked about. After surgery, I started remembering more, and what you see behind me is something I'll explain in a second, but it's the vision they gave me, which I'm meant to share with as many people as want to see it. At a doorway, I spoke to these beings and reached an accord. The first part of the deal was that you won't remember anything we've talked or anything you've seen, because if you do, you'll never stop talking about it. The second agreement required work. After returning home from the hospital, I began to understand my task and mission. As I stand at the threshold, I see these magnificent bright beings with a dark center due to energy. I can only see their glowing edges because my spiritual vision wasn't high enough to view them. A white light at their periphery turned tranquil blue. One being was standing forward, and it felt very masculine, and he was speaking to me, but he was surrounded by 5 other beings, some of which felt feminine, some masculine, and all seemed wise and loving and preparing me for something. I had no idea what that was. After saying goodbye, the agreement was communicated to me, and my spiritual body was turned away from them. I began moving back down a tunnel or through space toward Earth. I soon saw my body on a stretcher. I ran but felt like rubber, a pinwheel, or a rainbow energy fan. I suited right here on this rainbow body person, so I moved toward my stretcher-bound body. Before returning to my body, I was ecstatic and tranquil. I quickly opened my eyes and started moving my hands and feet, and I was so thrilled and grateful because I realized I wasn't dead or paralyzed. I relaxed after the nurses advised me, "Okay, settle down. You just came out of surgery. You have to relax." After 3 days in the hospital, I went home. I could barely move. Rehabilitation was difficult. However, a month after I went home from the hospital, these creatures' work or mission began to manifest. Even though I'm not an artist and was in the military, I want to embroider a tiny rose. This was done on a tiny piece of fabric in the center of this tapestry. I never stitched before, but as soon as I started, I felt joy, calm, and love. While sewing, I smiled and was delighted. A little dog, a tree, flowers, a butterfly, and additional fabric were added once the rose was finished, and I kept sewing. I began to see some of the visions these beings had shared with me and recollect my time as a Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka. This is strange because I recently flew all the way to Sri Lanka to an island in a little lagoon where I recall from my past incarnation as a monk named Nimali, which I still use. I was a British soldier in World War II who read Buddhist writings throughout the war, which encouraged me to become a monk. In this incarnation, I read Buddhist writings in Iraq that motivated me to meditate and become a monk. Near this existence, I returned to Sri Lanka and visited Pogasdua or Coconut Island near Kalutara. I took a rowboat to this island, walked down a path barefoot, and met a Buddhist monk. He asked me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I've been sewing a tapestry. I can remember being a monk in a past life, and I remember being here on this island." He then said, "Well, I also remember being here in a past life, and I remember being your teacher." It was a strange moment of recognizing multiple lifetimes and really understanding my energy has changed since I was a soldier, so I realized it's not the same. Tomorrow I'll change. As I continued to sew in Asheville, North Carolina, Early after my neck break, I felt compelled to move to Costa Rica, where I am now, and connect with the land while sewing. While sewing on the beach under the palms, I remembered one of the things I saw when I left my body. NDE survivors occasionally talk about going to a hall of records. Many people are allowed to view these huge bookcases, sometimes called the Akashic Records. Sometimes they last forever and can read about a past life. Some people, perhaps because they're more artistic or less bookish, can enter the tapestry room and see a giant, beautiful tapestry being woven by itself, with each thread representing a human life, spirit, or angel. Some human lives are unwholesome, evil, or dark. Others are saintly or high vibration. When examined individually, one thread may be dark and thin and sickly, while another may be thick and golden like a rope. When you pull back and look at the full tapestry, you notice that it's all energy and flawlessly weaved. Nothing is incorrect. I've been sewing in silent meditation for almost 4 years, and I only recently started talking about it. But the message I'm continuing to share is that the times we live in can seem dark, violent, confused, and like a lot of people are suffering. And they are. In other locations, people practice yoga, meditate, sing, meet in ritual, remain silent, and share love with their children and elders. When you step back, you see that we are all threads in a grand tapestry, each of us distinct and vital. We all serve a vital purpose and are creating something wonderful together. We can't always notice something in the actual body due to our restricted perspective. But after near-death experiences and leaving the body, we have a broader perspective. We don't have to die or come close to death to gain this perspective. We can sit in solitude and experience it peacefully. I suppose the future message is to not be afraid, since we're all precisely where we need to be and chose to live. If you're watching this, you're in a human body experiencing your own unique experience, which is perfect. Our collective healing is what the planet needs now. We all participate. I think the future is bright. I expect more damage and violence, but also beauty, healing, and unity. I also expect many people to switch off their phones and assemble in person to share energy. I think there will also be a reawakening of those powers we forgot we had, especially the ability to heal ourselves and each other. I believe that being in nature, in the forest, oceans, rivers, and lakes, and connecting with its tranquility is one of the most essential things we can do now and in the future, because nature changes at the correct speed with the world. Reconnecting with the wilderness and wild environment helps us anchor ourselves so we don't get caught up in the swirl of all the negativity on the planet. The trees and water are changing. I think one of the things that often comes to mind, which can be helpful to share, is that we can imagine the world as a body and cities in war or destruction as scabs or sores or wounds on the planet, while nature is the healing skin that's regrowing over the planet. If we just see the wounds, we'll think the world is sick. If we ignore the wounds and focus on nature, trees, and little gardens, we can rebuild the skin and ground. Overall, I'm attempting to sew and communicate a quiet garden. There's a lizard for fun. I conceive of the earth as a vast garden, and we all live in it and can help make it lovely. We can always grow flowers or plants, which brings serenity to others. We can also turn the garden into concrete, asphalt, metal, and factories, which isn't pleasant and makes people uncomfortable. We can fill it with cell phone masts and restless vibration that produces worry, which may not be the best use of the garden. I think the message I'll assume my whole life is just a beautiful, peaceful garden, and I think if more people see the world that way, we can more quickly heal the planet and realize that the planet, Earth, universe, and galaxies all have an order. Sickness comes and goes, and Earth heals. As we tune in, meditate, and become quiet, we will know exactly what we can do to heal ourselves, our family, our friends, and our small portion of the garden, and share its beauty and peace. Yes, my future message is hopeful. We may be going through some terrible times, but you might think of it like an addict who hits rock bottom, wakes up, gets fit and clean, and inspires others. I think the planet is doing that now. I believe the planet is healing and motivating us, and as we heal, we will inspire others. Do I feel, see, and hear these 6 entities I met? Do they have a message for the future? As I dwell on that subject, I get some minor goosebumps and a wonderful feeling. So I constantly feel like they're around, and especially when I'm talking to a friend or family member and the vibe is good, I sometimes see them. They appear to me as a diamond-sized light hovering in the air, often near the person I'm talking to. Sometimes, while I'm stitching alone, I see a flash of light and know they're around. Because they have no physical form and we're in 3 dimensions, or that's where our perception is centered, they appear as light, as a concentrated point of energy, only for a moment, and I get a strong reminder that they're about, which is great. As I listen to them today, the first message is that it's not the end. We're not at the end of the world. We're at a pivotal moment of incredible change, and the beauty on the horizon, the change that is to come, is almost beyond what we can imagine, and for good reason. And the most important thing to do is to take time out of our day to sit down with our folded legs in a peaceful position, with our eyes closed, and just be all. But the message for the future is that it is hopeful, that this is a natural course of events, and that we all have the strength, spiritual power, love, and connection to Source that we need to survive, continue, and that we're all here for a reason. We live in a period which gives me chills, but look how we're connecting. I'm just a random person living in Costa Rica who sues, and in the past, we only saw news video from professional media organizations, and the stories were extremely developed and specific to making money or selling us a specific interpretation of world events. But now, as more and more of us awaken and realize that our main purpose in life is to love, spread love, and be peaceful, sharing these messages reignites that strong, good spiritual energy, and the connections happen quickly, increasing serendipity. You only need one moment of silence to meditate. These beings of light I met told me that spiritually, things will continue to rise and that we're here to learn and grow.